Ket Gimel.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
If one says to his sons, I will slaughter the Pesach for the first among you to reach Yerushalayim, then as soon as the first one has put his head and the greater part of his body inside, he has acquired his portion, and he acquires his brother's portions for them. We may always be registered for it as long as there is at least an Keziah's volume for each one. They may be registered or withdraw from it until it is slaughtered, and Reb Shimon says until the blood is thrown for it. So here it's telling us that I could acquire a portion for my brothers if I had brothers, I would have half my body or more than that. And
right. Well, this part with this the circumstance they're talking about is that this is one family unit, and the little kids are he wants to get a bit of zrizos among them to get to Yerushalayim. So he says, okay, you'll have this chus, but it's not that he acquires the entire korban. He just is mezakeh his brothers.
Okay, so would that be true for a gadol then? I mean, an older person over 13.
Presumably these are kids who are over 13, because they're all mechuyev in the korban pesach, and for him to be mezakeh. So yeah, you could do the same thing technically with adults, but you can always be mezakeh somebody shelo b'fanav.
Okay. If one registers others upon his portion, then the members of the company are permitted to give him his portion, and he eats his, and they eat theirs. The Zav who experienced 2 discharges, they may slaughter on his behalf on the 7th day. If he experienced 3, they may slaughter on behalf of on his 8th day. A woman who observes a day against a day, they may slaughter on her behalf on her 2nd day. If she experiences charges for 2 days, they may slaughter on her behalf on the 3rd day, and the Zava, they may slaughter on her behalf on the 8th day. Okay.
Okay. So if you've got somebody who's an onen is somebody whose close relative died on that day. Okay, so min Torah, he's only an onen on the day. Midrabanan, he's an onen until the funeral. Okay. And somebody mefakech is hagal is somebody who's a rescue worker, who's let's say a building collapsed or something, and chas v'shalom, and he's going hunting for survivors. Okay, now he's in a matzav where he's safek going to end up being tameh, because where there might not be survivors. Okay. And similarly, somebody who has been promised that he's going to be released from jail by we're talking here by non-Jews, because by Jews it's not even a shaila that the Jews aren't going to keep their word, right? Okay. And similarly, a sick person or an old person who are able to eat a kazayas of korban pesach, shoftin aleihin, you are permitted to include them in the chabura. Okay, all of these people have got tzveikas as to whether or not they're going to be allowed to eat the korban pesach. Each one for their own reason. Like the onen he's an onen min Torah today, even though he might not have time to bury his dead before Yom Tov, but he'll be permitted to eat the korban pesach, even though D'Rabbanan he's still an onen. Nonetheless, Chazal were not strict with him to say that he shouldn't eat the korban pesach because of his aninus D'Rabbanan. So we're talking here about an Abun Kares for failing to do it. So it's a big deal that, and Chazal, I guess, didn't want to prevent him from eating. Okay, so all of these people are permitted to be included inside a chabura for the korban pesach. Al kula ein shoftin alein bifnei atzman, but you should make sure that there are other people inside the chabura who are definitely much more certainly going to be able to eat from the korban pesach, because all of these people, there's a shtickle safek about them, or there's a shtickle that they should not a chachila about letting them eat the korban pesach. So if you have a group of people, let's say you have a group of rescue workers, all trying to find people in some rubble on the 14th of Nisan, you shouldn't make one chabura out of them because it might turn out that they're all tamei, and then you've got a korban that's going to go to waste. Okay. Al kulan ein shoftin alein b'fnei atzman shema yaviu es pesach lidei psul, because you might make the whole korban pesach become pasul. Lefichach im eira behen psul. So therefore, if the taka was a psul in them, paturin milasos pesach sheni. So since they are permitted to be included inside in the chabura of the pesach rishon, therefore, if it turns out that they are unable to eat the korban pesach on that day, so for example, you've got your prisoner who they said they were going to release him and they didn't. So since he was permitted to be included inside the chabura, when he is ultimately released, he does not have an obligation to bring a pesach sheni. However, chutz min mefakech bagal, except for the rescue workers. Why? Because the fact is that it will turn out that he has actually been tamei the entire time. So if he was tamei the entire time, then he would have been patur from the korban pesach from the outset, and therefore he has to bring the pesach sheni.
I want to make sure you said that if they didn't release him, he wouldn't be able to eat the pesach, the korban pesach, right. And it doesn't have pesach sheni either.
He doesn't have to bring a pesach sheni because he was permitted to be included in the chabura for the first one, and he was prevented be'ones from eating it. He was
permitted to eat it, but he was prevented because he wasn't let out on time. So
yes.
Okay.
So therefore, he is actually patur from the pesach sheni. Yeah. Okay. Mishna zayin ein shachtin es pesach ala yachid divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot have one person bring a korban pesach by himself, because it says Rabbi Yehuda, how's one person going to eat an entire lamb? That's just gluttony, whatever. It's not going to work. Rabbi Yossi Matir, Rabbi Yossi says, well, you know what? If the guy is able to eat the entire thing, there's no reason why he shouldn't. Afilu chabura shel meya she'ein yicholim le'echol kazayis and shoftin aleihem. So even if you have a group of 100 people, each of which is able to eat less than a kazayis of meat, so between them, that each one having a little nibble, they'd be able to finish off a korban pesach. But since they're not eating a kazayis each, you cannot have a korban pesach like this. Okay. And you may not make a chabura that contains women, slaves, and children.
But Rabbi Yossi is permitting this based on this this pasuk over here. It says every man according to his eating. Mm-hmm. So if that's all he's allowed to eat, then that's okay.
Very good. Shkoyach, that's a great honor. Thank you.
So
I see that in my commentary as well. It should be offload.
Samakta over there? Is this Samakta over? That's what it's taken from?
It's Asmachta said comes from us. Yeah, it should be offload. Very good. So the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi on this. Okay. So you can't make a group out of women and slaves and children. Now the Gemara explains that this is talking about not making a mixed group of women with slaves, because each one individually is obligated for korban pesach. Women, even though it's mitzvah asher shezman grama, this is one of the ones where women and slaves are actually obligated. But you shouldn't make a group of women and slaves together, because this is just might lead to mixed dancing. Okay. But you could make a group of just women. That would be fine. Or just slaves, and that would also be fine. And katanim, you shouldn't make a group just by themselves because they don't have because they're not bnei das. They don't have adult das, and therefore you can't make a chabura just out of children.
What they say when the Gemara says it's okay to do it just with a group of women or a group of slaves, okay, right? Would that include women and female slaves together?
Female slaves would be fine.
Right. Okay. All right. So that's all right. Yeah.
Right. The female slaves also have the same chiyuv.
As long as it's not mixed in any way.
As long as it's not right. Exactly.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Mishna Ches. Onen tovel v'ochel is piskol ha'erev. So if so, you have if you we said a couple of mishnayos ago that the onen is allowed to be included inside the chabura. Okay, so what does the onen do? He can okay. You can asu the onen his coaching. So even though his close relative died during the day, so he's going to be allowed to eat that night. But the Chachamim made a general gezerah about kodshim that an onen shouldn't even eat at night. When is this talking about? This is talking about other kodshim. But with the Korban Pesach, they didn't make such a gezerah because the Korban Pesach is something where failing to eat it is an onish of kares. It's one of only two mitzvahs asay, that have the punishment of kares. You know what the other one is?
No, I'm
Bris
sorry.
Milah. Bris Milah.
I'm sorry. Bris Milah. Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. So while Chachamim said that onen shouldn't eat any other kodshim at night either, they didn't make such a gezerah on the Korban Pesach because that's because of the significance, the importance of the Korban Pesach. So he can tovel v'ochel is piskol ha'erev. He can. Now, why does he have to go to mikveh? I'm just wondering why he has a feel to go to mikveh at all. If he's tamei from his mace, then he can't bring the Korban Pesach at all. Then he has to bring a Pesach Sheni. So why does it? I'm just wondering now why he has to go to mikveh. It suddenly pops up as a question for me. So no, V'lo b'kodshim. Does the article mention anything about why
That's what I'm looking for. No, it doesn't. I don't see anything here about that. Well, Rambam says it offers another reason. He says the immersion serves to alert him to pause in his mourning so that he has not become distracted. Distracting itself, a period when one is not vigilant against contact with contaminating agents can disqualify one from eating offerings.
Oh, very good. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Other kodshim he is not allowed to eat. Okay. Because that's just mitzvahs asay and Chachamim kept the gezerah on him that he shouldn't eat any other kodshim until after the funeral. Okay. Oh, here we go. Actually, I'll just see it now. The Tahati's commentary also says that he has to go to mikveh to Takanas Chachamim on Mechusar Kippurim Tzrichat Tfilat Kodesh. So an onen and a Mechusar Kippurim need to go to mikveh before eating any kodshim, and the reason is because up until now they were aser in achilas kodshim, and Rambam explains. So exactly as you explained. Okay, thank you very much. Hashomeh al Mesa. Okay, so somebody who has just heard that one of his close relatives has died, and or somebody who has gathered the bones of his parents in order to bury them in a fixed grave. Remember, they had that custom of reburying the dead. Right. They would take them. They would put them first into a temporary grave, and then after some time, they would just gather the graves and put them into the burial cave. Okay. So all of these people may go to mikveh and eat any kind of kodshim, even other things than the Pesach, because on the day of the Shmuah itself, there's only an onen drabanan on that day, whereas at night that comes after that, he doesn't have any kind of din of aninus. So this type of when you hear the shmiya, this is talking about where you got news from Kutzlaritz or whatever. You're not talking about the internet. You're talking about a messenger came and tells him, your brother died 2 weeks ago. So he's an onen on that day, but then that's it. He's immediately allowed to eat, and that's only onenis derabanan.
Did we ever learn, did it say in Mishna at all about why we do this reburying? What was the reason for the reburying?
As far as I recall, I think because the burial caves were space limited.
I'm sorry, well, what? I'm sorry?
There was a space limitation on their burial caves. You've got an ancestral burial plot, and please go, you've got a nice big family. And there's not really that much space to give everyone their own, Dalit Amas to be buried in. So they would, I think they would leave the body to decay and then just collect the bones and rebury the bones, which is a lot more compact.
I always thought that it was that one was not supposed to disturb the mace. One is not supposed to, taking the bones out. No,
that's true. That's true. And I think it's because it's Aldaski that this is how it was originally intended, that they were going to be reburied like this. And also, I mean, if somebody gives instructions, for example, to be buried in Israel, and they couldn't do it up until now, then they can exhume the body and bring it to Israel.
We were trying to do that with my father-in-law. It was, because my mother-in-law was buried here. We went, she came with us. Tried to do it with my father-in-law, but became a whole big machlokas. So not from our part, but yeah.
Okay. Gershon is gar be'erev Pesach. Now, what happens if you have a goy who converts on erev Pesach? So now, is he tahor? Is he tamei? He goes to mikveh, and everything is good. Beis Shammai omrim tov el v'ochelet bis kol erev. So Beis Shammai say, yeah, not a problem. Why should there be any issue? When he was a goy, there was no tumah that affected him at all. Now that he's a Jew, so even let's say in our worst case scenario, if you had a goy who buried his father that morning, okay, so he was and he celebrated, now that my father's dead, now I can become a Jew. So he goes to the mikveh, and on the 14th he converts, and now he goes to the mikveh, and he comes out and he brings his korban pesach, and he can eat it that night. No problem, says Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel here is one of their famous places where they're more machmir than Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel omrim haporesh mina orla to poresh mina kever. Says they paskin that the guy who is separating from his foreskin, well, presumably he actually separated from his foreskin before, but he separates from his non-Jewishness. It's he has separated from the grave, and they made this gezerah because they didn't want the guy to remember. Oh, you remember last year I buried my father in the morning, and when I went to mikveh during the day, and then I came out and ate my korban pesach that night. They don't want him to have this memory that Tumas Mace disappears within such a short time. So they made this. Gezerah that any guy who converts has to wait a full week before he can eat the kodshim, so that he shouldn't.
A full week.
Yeah, he's got to have a full week of tuna. Let's just see exactly how they say it. So therefore, Beis Hillel says, he needs to have paraduma. Right. So after going to mikveh and converting, he has to treat himself as if he's just been tamei meis, and he has to get haza'ah on the 3rd and on the 7th day. Yeah, Beis Shammai didn't make such a gezerah. Okay, but an Aral Yisrael, since his right, let's say you've got an Aral Yisrael who, for whatever medical reasons, cannot be circumcised. he's not allowed to eat a korban pesach because, whether it's an honest or not, whether it's fair or not, the fact is that if you're an aral, it's a psum. An aral is not allowed to eat the korban pesach. So if he somehow finds some way of becoming, if he decides that he's going to get his bris milah on erev pesach, even Beis Hillel agree that he's allowed to go to mikveh and eat his pesach that evening. It's only when he's converting from being a non-Jew that we have this gezerah on him. Right.
Easy day. We have Vav Aleph.
Yeah.
These things pertaining to the Pesach offering override Shabbos: its slaughter, throwing of its blood, removal of the ophel from its entrails, and the burning of its flat fats. But its roasting and the rinsing of its entrails do not override Shabbos. Carrying it, bringing it from outside the Sabbath limit, and cutting off its wart do not override Shabbos. Rav Eliezer says they do override it. Said Rav Eliezer, but is this not a logical argument? If slaughter is on Pesach, which is scripturally prohibited as a labor, override Shabbos, then these which are forbidden merely because of a rabbinic prohibition should certainly override Shabbos. Rabbi Yeshua said to him, "Let the festival laws prove this. For on it they permitted labor, but they forbade on it what is prescribed because of rabbinic prohibitions." But Eliezer said to him, "What is this, Yeshua? What proof can be adduced from a permissible act to a mitzvah?" Rabbi Akiva responded and said, "Let sprinkling prove this, for it is a mitzvah, and it is forbidden because of a rabbinic prohibition, and does not override Shabbos. So you should not wonder about these, even though they are a mitzvah, and are forbidden because of rabbinic prohibition. They do not override Shabbos." Rabbi Eliezer said to him, "But about this do I apply my logic. If a slaughter which is forbidden because it is characterized as a labor overrides Shabbos, then sprinkling, which is forbidden only by rabbinic prohibition, should surely override Shabbos." Rabbi Akiva said to him, "Perhaps the opposite is more correct. If sprinkling, which is forbidden by rabbinic prohibition, does not override Shabbos, then slaughtering, which is forbidden because it is categorized as labor, should surely not override Shabbos." Rabbi Eliezer said to him, "Akiva, you have uprooted what is written in the Torah. In the afternoon, in its appointed time, which applies both on weekdays and on Shabbos." Said he, read Akiva to him, "My master, give me an appointed time for these, which is like the appointed time for slaughter." A general rule was stated by Rabbi Akiva: any labor that can be performed on the eve of Sabbath does not override Shabbos. Slaughtering, which cannot be performed on the eve of Shabbos, does override Shabbos. How would you like to have been in a room with all these, four people, the way they have it written over here, with the exclamation points and they're yelling at each other, kind of thing? There were different time periods, but I was like,
Yeah.
When does one bring a chagiga with it? When it is offered on a weekday in purity, and it is sufficient. But when it is offered on Shabbat, or it is abundant,
when it's insufficient, when the korban pesach is insufficient meat for the people.
and it is insufficient.
Yes.
Right. But when it is offered on Shabbos or is abundant or in contamination, we do not bring a chagiga with it. Okay.
Erevin.
Okay. Vav Dalet. What may rights be seated? Beis Shammai says, while it is yet day, and Beis Hillel says, when it is dark. One who ceded his rights then carried out, whether unintentionally or deliberately, restricts. These are the words of Reb Meir. Reb Yehuda says deliberately, he restricts; unintentionally, he does not restrict. In a house, if a house owner was a partner with neighbors, with this one in wine and with that one in wine, they need not make an erev. With this one in wine and with that one in wine, they must make an erev.
No, with oil. The second one is oil.
I'm sorry, with oil. I'm sorry, with this one in wine and with that one in oil, they must make an erev. And Rabbi Shimon said, in either case, they need not make an erev. If 5 groups spent the Shabbos in one mansion, Beis Shammai says an erev for each group, but Beis Shammai Hillel says one erev for all of them. They agree, however, that when some of them are quartered in rooms in upper stories, they need an erev for each group. Okay. Chala. Allah Dalad Gimel. The 2 kavs and a kav of rice and a kav of truma is between. These do not combine. A thing from which its challah has been separated lies in between. They combine since it has already become liable to challah. If a new kav and an old kav bit one another, Rabbi Ishmael says, let him take from the middle, but the Chachamim forbid. If one takes challah from a kav, Rabbi Akiva says it is challah, but the sages say it is not challah. And we're saying by bit, it means that they're touching each other.
It means that they're baked into each other, such that
Baked
not
into
that
each other,
they're
right.
touching, but they actually
Right.
you have to tear them apart. You know how bread gets when it's baked close
There
to
were
each other.
challahs I went to buy, not last week, the week before, and they were all attached to each other. The whole thing was like one big challah. People we were all pulling it apart. If there were 2 calves and challah was taken from each separately, and he afterwards joined them into one piece of dough, Rabbi Akiva exempts, but the Chachamim declare it liable. Thus, it stringently burns into its leniency.
Right. So Rabbi Akiva, who originally said that the taking challah off a small amount is nonetheless valid challah. So he's going to say, well, this has already been had challah taken off it if you rejoin that. Right. Because Chachamim say it wasn't done in the first place, so you've got to redo it now. Okay.
Makshirin Gimel Zion. Regarding donkey drivers who are passing through a river and their sacks fell into the water, if they were happy, it is included in the law of Bekin Yutain. Rabbi Yehuda says it is impossible not to be happy, rather only if they turn the sacks over. If one's feet were full of mud, and similarly the feet of its animal, and he passed through a river, if he was happy, it is Bekin Yutain. Rabbi Yehuda says it is impossible not to be happy, rather only if he stood still and rinsed. With regard to a person and a non-kosher animal, it is always tameh. Regarding one who brings wheels and cattle gear down to the water during a heat wave in order to that they bond, this water is bakin yutain. Why do I get that mixed up? Regarding one who brings an animal down to the water to drink, the water that comes up in its mouth is included in the law of Bakin Yutain. Yutan, that's Yutan, right?
It's right, Yutan.
Yutan, I always say Cain, I don't know why. But as for the water which is brought up on its legs, it is not included in the Bakin Yutan.
See, the difference is what is the intention? If the person's intention is that the animal should drink, then he wants the water to be on their mouths. So therefore, whatever the animal splashes off its mouth onto produce is Bakin. But if what comes off its legs is irrelevant, he didn't have intention for that, so therefore that's not Bakin.
Its legs, even if the water brought up on its legs is included in Bakin Yutan, during the time of foresores and threshing, the water was always tummy. If a deaf, mute, a deranged person, or a minor brought the animal down to the water, even though it intended that its feet be rinsed, the water is not Bakin Yutan. If they have legal actions, but they do not have legal intent. Dalet Aleph. Regarding one who bent down to drink, the water that comes up on his mouth and mustache is included in Baki Yutan. But as for the water on his nose and on his head and his beard, it is not included in Baki Yutan. Regarding one who fills a barrel with water, the water that comes up on its outside and on the rope that is coiled around its neck and on the rope that is for its needs, the water is Baki Yutan. How much is for its needs? Reb Shimon says a tefach. If he put it beneath a pipe, it is not included in Bakin Yutan. Regarding someone
That's it.
That's it. Okay, I got so carried away there. Okay.
Achin Dalet.
The age category depends upon the subject of the vow. How so? A young man who vowed the eruch of an old man gives the eruch of an old man, and an old man who vowed the eruch of a young man gives the eruch of a young man. The erakin depends upon the subject of the eruch. How so? A man who vowed the eruch of a woman gives the eruch of a woman, and a woman who vowed the eruch of a man gives the eruch of a man. The eruch depends upon the time of the eruch. How so? If he vowed someone's eruch when he was less than 5 years of age, and he then became older than 5 or less than 20 and of age, and he then became older than 20, he gives according to the time of the eruch. The 30th day is judged as below this age. The 5th year and the 20th year are judged as below this age. The pasuk says, and if from 60 years of age and up, if a male, we derive from all of them that the 60th year, just as the 60th year is judged as below this age, so too the 5th year and the 20th year are judged as below this age. Is this indeed so? If scripture made the 60th year as below it to be stringent, shall we then make the 5th year and the 20th year as below it to be lenient? To teach us this, as is said, years for a Gezerah Sheva, just as the years mentioned in the regard to the 60th year are judged below it, so too the years mentioned in regard to the 5th year and the 20th are judged as below it, whether to be lenient or be stringent. But Elazar says until they are over the years by 1 month and a day. If one says, I take upon myself to give my weight, he gives his weight. If he specified silver, he's required to give silver. If he specified gold, he's required to give gold. There was an incident concerning the mother of Yamatia, who said, I take upon myself to give my daughter's weight, and she went up to Yerushalayim, and they weighed her, and she gave her weight in gold. If one says, I take upon myself to give the weight of my arm, but Yehuda says, he fills the cask with water and inserts his arm up to his elbow, and he takes donkey meat, sinews and bones, and he adds to it until it fills up. Rav Yossi says, now, how is it possible to determine precisely flesh against flesh and bones against bones? Rather, we estimate how much the arm is likely to weigh. If one says, I take upon myself to give the value of my arm, we evaluate him to determine how much he is worth with the arm and how much he is worth without the arm. This is the stringency of vows of worth over Arakim vows. And the stringency of Arakim vows over vows of worth is in what manner? If one said, I take upon myself to give my Eric, and he died, the heirs must give it. But he said but if one said, I take upon myself to give my worth, and he died, the heirs not give it, for the dead have no worth. If one says, I take upon myself to give the Eric of my arm or the Eric of my leg, he has said nothing. But if one says, I take upon myself to give the Eric of my head or the Eric of my liver, he must give the Eric of his entire self. This is the rule for anything upon which one's life depends. He gives the Eric of his entire self.
Gittin.
And Gittin. After this, we're going to
Kedushin.
If one left over part of the get and wrote on it the second column, on the second column, and the witnesses are at the bottom, it is valid. If the witness is signed to the top of the page on the side or the back of an open get, it's void. The top of this one was attached to the top of this one, and the witnesses are in between, they are both void. If the end of this one was attached to the end of this one, and the witnesses are in between, that with which the witnesses are read is valid. If the top of this one was attached to the bottom of this one, and the witnesses are in between, that which his witnesses are read at its end is valid. And get whose witness writing is in Hebrew and whose witnesses are in Greek and his witnesses are in Hebrew, one witness in Hebrew and one in Greek, for one which has the writing of the scribe and the witness is valid. A signature which reads so-and-so witnesses is valid. One which reads the son of so-and-so witness is valid. If he wrote so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, and he did not write witness, it is valid. And this is what the pure-minded of Yerushalayim used to do. If he wrote his surname or her surname, it is valid. A get drawn up under coercion, if by a Jew, it is valid, but by a Gentile, it is void.
So by coercion, that's talking about where the Beis Din came and enforced him and said, Pastor, you have to give the get, and they sanction him, then that's valid. But if they went to non-Jewish courts to force him, that's not a good get.
Yeah. But if they beat him through Gentiles who say, do as the Jews say to you, and it is valid. If she was reported in the town to be married, she is married. To be divorced, she is divorced, as long as there are no qualifications. What is a qualification? If they said so-and-so divorced his wife on a condition, or he threw her kedushin to her, and there was doubt if it was close to her or close to him, this is a disqualification.
Okay. Then
have a great day, Shaw.
A wonderful day to you too.
And as usual, the technicians did not show up, so we are okay.
Okay, have a great day.
Boy.